If you're a Nets fan, the word inbound should make you cringe a little bit. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. If you have not already subscribed, go ahead and do that below. Today, we're discussing the Nets' issues all season long with inbounding the basketball. It's been the stuff of nightmares. And to make sense of the madness, I went through every single late game inbound of the season, sorted by baseline out of bounds, sideline out of bounds, and go ahead or game tying out of bounds, to look for some pattern recognition. I had a lot of findings. So I'm gonna give away the lead here, but inbounding from the baseline with a lead largely hasn't been an issue for the Brooklyn Nets this season, which I know sounds crazy considering one of the most embarrassing plays of the year came from this exact scenario, in which Joe Harris straight up tossed the ball to the Wizards, eventually leading to the loss. But that mishap I would consider to be an anomaly. For example, against the Miami Heat, he was able to inbound the ball 3 straight times to close out the game for Brooklyn. The only other noticeable mishap I could find was when Kyrie Irving inbounded the ball to Joe Harris against the New York Knicks, nearly leading to the turnover, which was a weird situation in the first place because Joe Harris is just a 72% free throw shooter, whereas Kyrie is a 90% free throw shooter. So I have no idea why Kyrie was inbounding to Joe Harris instead of the opposite. But again, all in all, I don't think it's a huge issue. Inbounding from the sidelines, especially in the backcourt, is where things start to get a little hairy. Before getting into the actual plays themselves, we must first discuss Brooklyn's basic setup in this situation. Nash likes to keep his players spread apart in sideline out of bounds situations. 2 in the backcourt, 2 in the front court, to ensure as much spacing as humanly possible to get the ball in, while also keeping as many defenders away from the action as humanly controllable. Better yet, I'll let Coach Nash explain it himself, in response to a question I asked him last week.
As far as getting the ball in bounds, I thought there was plenty of space to throw that ball to Blake over the top. Maybe it was just a little underthrown, and that's 2 guys that haven't been in that position a lot. So, we grow from it and we learn, but, you can, it's 6 of one, half dozen another. You can put all 5 guys down in one end of the court and they could junk it up and switch and take it away, and you can't get it in and you have no timeouts. Or we had, BG with a ton of space, and we just kind of underthrew the pass a little bit, but those 2 guys haven't been in that situation together, so we'll take the experience and move on.
We'll get into the play against the Detroit Pistons that Nash was discussing in that clip in just a moment, but I wanted to first discuss the different variations of offense that the Nets can get from their basic setup. The first variation is that the players involved, Kyrie Irving and James Harden here, can screen for one another and offset each other's defenders before breaking apart in different directions. They can also fake this action by coming together but breaking apart before the screen is actually set in what's known as a ghost screen. The reason you do a ghost screen is to play off the defense's expectations, who are likely expecting to switch in the event of a screen. And then there's the third variation where the players involved don't even bother to go set a screen for each other and just break apart in opposite directions. Now, in my research, I didn't find that any of these variations had a more positive impact on the outcome than the other. And sure, the Nets could sprinkle in little things to create larger crevices of space. I really like this twirling screen as a means for that. I've seen some call it a tornado screen, and I get the feeling that's probably not the official name. But even with this, I don't feel confident in saying that this would absolutely guarantee a better result. Speaking of results, just taking a glance at inbounds plays from teams across the league, some teams, like the Clippers in the first clip and the Celtics in the second clip, match Brooklyn's spacing by having 2 players in the front court, 2 players in the back court, and working from there. A team like the Timberwolves will begin with 2 players in the front court and 2 players in the back court, but then have its front court players slowly creep into the back court as the inbounding possession ensues. Milwaukee's setup is very similar to the Timberwolves, with the front court players creeping into the back court, except with the variation that these front court players also set a screen for each other as well. The Raptors begin with 3 players in the back court to run a set play, and then the Hornets begin with 4 players in the back court, only to then sprawl out into different directions on the floor. From my research, I learned that none of these setups produce distinctive advantages, and because of that, I'm not going to sit here and tell an NBA coaching staff that they're setting up their inbounds wrong. But my research did yield one specific finding. The personnel, especially the inbounder, was a big big factor. Joe Harris has only inbounded the ball once from the sidelines with the Nets holding a lead, and you could make the argument that he misses a bounce pass window to James Harden here, who has a sizable lead on his man Alec Burks, ultimately forcing the Nets to call a timeout. Funny enough, it's been Jeff Green who has been Brooklyn's most frequent sideline inbounder, 7 by my count. Well, technically 8, but we're saving that last one for additional analysis in just a minute. To Green's credit, he's a patient veteran-level inbounder who is willing to wait for a secondary window to open up if Brooklyn's primary option, James Harden here, gets snuffed out by the opposition. He's also unafraid of squeezing in a pass into double coverage. And Green will find the tiniest windows of space to toss those soccer throw-in style passes. One thing to look for in that last clip is who Jeff Green is throwing into: Kyrie Irving and James Harden, Brooklyn's 2 best free throw shooters at 89.6% and 86.7% respectively. I'll explain why that's important in just a moment. Where Green falters a bit as an inbounds passer is with his consistency, which is oddly representative of him as a player, slightly inconsistent as a passer. This is the play that Steve Nash was talking about before, where Jeff Green underthrew a pass to Blake Griffin against the Pistons. And that's been a little bit of a trend. He nearly underthrew this pass to Harden in the second game against the Pistons, though thankfully Harden, being the tank with great hands that he is, drew contact to save the play. And similar to Joe Harris, Jeff's not really a willing bounce passer, and we have a good example of that here. I do think there's a nice little window to slip one of those in to Joe Harris right about here. Which, speaking of bounce passes, brings me to our next player. James Harden has inbounded the ball twice this season for the Nets, and as one of the 3 best passers in the NBA, it's not a huge surprise that he finds Kyrie Irving with a bounce pass before the window even opens. He's an instinctive rather than reactive passer, and the thing to watch for in this second clip is who he is inbounding to, a pair of 86% or better free throw shooters. However, with KD out, Brooklyn runs into a paradox. Its best inbounder is also one of its 2 best free throw shooters, a necessity when looking for inbounding targets. And here's what head coach Steve Nash had to say about that specific debacle.
You know, we have different guys taking the ball out, different guys receiving the ball with injuries and foul trouble, and so guys are getting new experiences. So in one respect, you know, you have some concern. In other respects, you know, you're missing the guys that are usually in those positions. So it's an experience for the guys that are now in those positions, which will make them better. And hopefully we'll also have, you know, our key guys in those moments as well going forward.
Nash is dead on it. With a fully healthy roster with Brooklyn's key guys, the issues with inbounding should be remedied. With James Harden directing traffic as the inbounder, and with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant improvising and cutting off one another, I bet you all these silly problems just simply go away. Talent tends to do that. One thing I'd like to see in the future is perhaps Blake Griffin inbounding the ball, given that he's Brooklyn's 2nd best passer. Though you do run the risk of an opponent fouling Griffin, a 66.7% shooter, if the ball is passed back his way. One quick clip before we move on. The New York Knicks and basketball genius Tom Thibodeau ran a very interesting style of coverage, with Emmanuel quickly playing center field rather than guarding any of Brooklyn's players in the front court. Where it gets even more interesting is when the Knicks allowed James Harden to catch the ball without much trouble at all. But then they spring a triple team onto Harden, and in my best Star Wars impersonation, it's a trap. And part of me just wonders if they knew the Nets playbook by heart and played off of that. It's something to watch. It's probably too early to say anything concrete about the Nets inbounding in situations where the team is looking to either go ahead or go for the tie, because to be honest, the Nets just haven't really been in many games where they are behind in the 4th quarter. But in the 2 possessions we've got, you'll notice that the Nets just sort of try to shove the ball to Kevin Durant without much detail or anything to these sets, which is fine. They get a pretty good look after the Washington Wizards take away the initial entry to Kevin Durant, and ultimately Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot misses the shot. But these haven't exactly been Brad Stevens level end of game out of bounds plays, full of cuts and screens and fakes and diversions and all sorts of lovely motion to keep the opponent on its heels. That's not to say that this coaching staff can't design sets like that. This is a really nice baseline out of bounds set in which Joe Harris curls around a stagger screen or double screen to hop right into a corner 3 over the outstretched arms of of Karl Anthony Towns. So for now, I don't feel confident in laying down any spicy takes about Brooklyn's inbounding in these situations, but it's just something to monitor going forward if the Nets do find themselves in tight situations. And with that, thank you for watching. No concluding thoughts today. I think you guys get the point. When this roster gets healthy, the inbounding issues will probably be a thing of the past. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe, and go ahead and share this video on Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit. If you enjoyed this, you know the drill. Follow me on Twitter. And again, thank you guys for watching this. I had a lot of fun putting this together. Peace!